Hey there, welcome back to another review. This time it is definitely going to be more of a rant, and I really did not want to be sitting here ranting on yet another X-Men movie. But here I am, and this is going to be the last X-Men review for a while until maybe I decide to do a series of videos on the animated series from the 90s, but that's not anytime soon. So this is going to be the final X-Men review, and it's kind of fitting that it's another rant and review because that's honestly kind of sums up this franchise. It's like this franchise gets something right, and then it fucks it up. Then it gets it right, and then it fucks it up again. It just seems to be a trend with this franchise. Hopefully it continues and they get it right with Supernova. But I have my doubts. They already fucked up the Dark Phoenix storyline once. I don't really have any hope that they're not going to fuck it up again, but we shall see. Anyway, X-Men Apocalypse is a 2016 film that came out last year in May on the 27th. It had a budget of $178 million, which, to be honest, it doesn't really look like it's on the screen, especially with certain CGI sequences, which look woefully, god-awfully bad. They do not look like CGI from a $178 million film. Now, the movie grossed $543.9 million worldwide, which is definitely a lower box office total than Days of Future Past, and still made a profit, of course, to warrant another one, but it's not doing gangbusters. It didn't do gangbusters like Logan, which has, I think by now already crossed the $1 billion mark worldwide, which I gotta say, wow, good for Logan. Seriously. And it deserves it. But this movie deserved middling box office returns. In my opinion, I think this movie deserved a flop. Because that's what it is. It's a flop. It's a total flop. It's the franchise was standing tall after Days of Future Past, after Bryan Singer and Simon Kinberg helped bring it back off its knees and lifted it back up, and then it slipped and it tripped over its own dick and fell on its ass with X-Men Apocalypse. Bryan Singer comes back to direct the film. Simon Kinberg also comes back to write the movie, but none of the magic that either of them had with the previous film is here. I don't know if it was studio interference. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it was sheer incompetence on their part, but honestly, they are definitely two of the weakest parts about this movie. Simon Kinberg and Bryan Singer. Features cinematography by Newton Thomas Sigel. It's edited by John Ottman and Michael Lewis Hill. Features a score by John Ottman. It's based on a story by Bryan Singer, Simon Kinberg, Michael Dougherty, and Dan Harris. It stars James McAvoy as Professor X, Michael Fassbender as Magneto, Jennifer Lawrence as Mystique, but she's not really in the blue makeup that much, so it's mostly just Jennifer Lawrence as Jennifer Lawrence for the majority of the movie. Evan Peters as Quicksilver, Oscar Isaac as Apocalypse, Nicholas Hoult as Beast, Rose Byrne comes back to the franchise as Moira McTaggart. You have Ty Sheridan, who has a role, I think he's the one who plays Cyclops, I believe. I believe that's who it is. Yeah, you have Ty Sheridan plays Cyclops. You have Sophie Turner, who plays Jean Grey. Olivia Munn is also in this as Psylocke. You have Lucas Till, who has a brief cameo role as Havoc. Kodi Smit-McPhee is in this as well. And you have Alexandra Shipp. I think Kodi Smit-McPhee, I think that's the actress. I think that might be the actress who plays Storm. I could be wrong, but she really didn't leave that much of an impression on me, so forgive me. Josh Helman also returns as a young striker. Ben Hardy plays Angel. And you also have Hugh Jackman in a cameo role, which is pretty memorable. And you also have Alexandra Shipp in the cast. Now, this movie, it was disappointing. Just like The Last Stand and First Class before it, it's another one of those films. in the X-Men franchise that has some positives, but also has a lot of negatives, and ultimately the negatives far outweigh the positives and make the film come crashing down. And I'm just tired of seeing this happen with this franchise. I really am. Why do they keep fucking this up? Why do they keep doing this? It doesn't help either that it takes one of my favorite storylines, the Age of Apocalypse, and completely bones it. Completely fucks it up. Just like they did with Dark Phoenix, they fucked up the Age of Apocalypse storyline. They also fucked up Apocalypse. They made him a zero-rate villain. Not a low-rent villain. Not a second-rate villain. A zero-rate villain. Anyway, I'll get to the cons soon enough. Let's actually talk about some of the good things about X-Men Apocalypse, shall we? So we have the performances by James McAvoy, Michael Fassbender, Nicholas Hoult, Rose Byrne, Sophie Turner, and Ty Sheridan. I thought they were all solid. Rose Byrne was nice to see her again. Sophie Turner and Ty Sheridan were newcomers to the cast, and I honestly did think that they made a great first impression. I think they were perfectly cast as a young Jean Grey and a young Cyclops, and I really can't wait to see more of their characters in the next film. And James McAvoy and Michael Fassbender, they were great, as usual. And also Evan Peters. Evan Peters was good with Quicksilver. I mean, any scene with Quicksilver in this movie was a pro for me. It was a great thing. The scene where he saves all the kids from the explosion in the X-Mansion while Sweet Dreams Are Made of This by the Rhythmics is playing in the background. I loved it. I loved that scene. That was great. That was a great sequence. That was really cool. I love these scenes where Quicksilver is doing things in slow motion. It's a really cool idea, and it's always great. I can't wait to see what scene they're going to do in Supernova. And I hope he's actually in the film more. I hope he's one of the... And they're showing him being built up to be one of the main X-Men. And I hope that's the case. I mean, Evan Peters was definitely one of the brightest spots about this movie. A few of the action sequences I did like. The opening sequence of the film is one of the action sequences which actually did surprise me. It takes place in ancient Egypt. It reminded me a little bit of Stargate in some ways, partly probably because of the score, which I felt was a little bit too much like Stargate for my tastes. But anyway, you have this opening sequence in Egypt, and it's pretty crazy. I mean, there's these, Apocalypse and his followers, his four horsemen, and these other Egyptians are trying to betray him and trying to stop him from transferring his consciousness into another mutant. And these kind of just really cool, crazy scenes that happen in this opening sequence. It's well edited. It's fast paced. You got scenes where Apocalypse is melting this flesh off of people's bones. I mean, you actually see people's skin slough off, and you see them in just skeletons. You see people just literally left to be just skeletons with flesh hanging off of them. I could not believe that I saw that in a PG-13 movie. I mean, that looked pretty close to an R rating. So that was a pretty cool sequence. And then you had the opening titles with the great score by John Ottman. I love how these X-Men films have the same style of opening credits. I think it's a really nice touch. So that was cool. It was a good start. Anyway, probably because Apocalypse didn't open his mouth. Maybe that's why. And a few of the other action sequences I liked as well, a little bit in the climax and a few other scenes here and there. This movie actually did improve upon Days of Future Past in that regard. It actually had a bit more action sequences in it, which I thought the film could have used. I thought Days of Future Past could have had more action sequences. It would have made it an even better film. And so it seems like they actually took some of those criticisms and ended up, implementing some of those things that I thought were missing in Days of Future Past into this movie. But they also forgot other things that made Days of Future Past really good. So it's like they improved upon things, but then didn't improve upon or didn't even bother to follow the same path, the right path that Days of Future Past had, which is frustrating. You can see the potential in this film, but it just gets wasted. It's completely wasted. They also have Wolverine's cameo, which I did enjoy. I did like that sequence. There was really nice crowd pleaser, a nice little throwback, and a nice little callback is really the word I was looking for. A nice callback to Weapon X. So it was a pretty brutal scene too. Berserker rage, Wolverine going around fucking people up. That was cool. I did enjoy that sequence. The harder tone, the near R violence, I did like as well. I mean, Apocalypse is like severing people's heads from their bodies, melting flesh off of people's bones. Professor X is getting his ass kicked in his mind uh, by Apocalypse, and he's actually bleeding. There's blood in this movie. There's actually a harder tone, which I like, but at the same time, it's also a negative because the movie doesn't have a consistent tone. So you have this hard tone, but then you have this goofy, sort of silly, over-the-top villain, and then you have these other elements to the story, like Jubilee and Cyclops and Jean Grey and Nightcrawler going in and going to the mall and going to see Return of the Jedi, and then you have all this other stuff that just, there's this clash that goes on, this clash of tones, and it doesn't work. It's jarring. But I do admit I did like the harder tone and the near R violence. I just wish it was more consistent with its tone. The makeup effects, the costume design, I also thought were other pros for the film. I was surprised by how much I didn't hate Apocalypse's makeup effects. I don't think they were the problem. He didn't look like Ivan Ooze. But the problem is, he acted like Ivan Ooze. So, yeah, he came across as Ivan Ooze-like because of his acting and because of what Oscar Isaac was given to say in this movie. The costume design was nice. I especially loved seeing the 90s style costume for Cyclops and some of the other X-Men in the pre-credit. It's basically the sequence that ends the film before the credits start. I did like seeing that. That was a nice touch. And I can't wait to see what they're going to do with the costume design for Supernova, which is supposed to take place in the 90s. So, I mean, yeah, there are some pros. The film is not without its merits. But the cons are what brings the film down, or what brings the film and the franchise back down to its fucking knees. And I cannot believe I'm saying that. Why? Why Fox? Why 20th Century Fuckface? Why Bryan Singer? Why Simon Kinberg? Why are you doing this? Why do you keep letting X-Men fans down? Sooner or later, we're just going to stop. We're just going to not give you a chance anymore. We're just going to be like, no, we've burned far too many times. You fucked it up again. I'm done. I'm not seeing Supernova. And no, I'm not going to see Supernova in the theater. It's not happening. Unless somebody pays for a ticket. So I'm sure as hell not paying to see that in the theater. I'm not giving them my money. They don't deserve it. Because they clearly aren't learning. I'm sorry. You don't get a get-out-of-jail-free card for not fucking up once. If you fuck up again, then you're back in the shitter. You're not still up high, out of the shitter, out of the toilet, and smelling like roses. So anyway, the direction by Singer, I honestly did think was a negative for this film. What happened? This direction is lazy. It's uninspired. There's not a really lot of style to it. It looks flat. He doesn't get the most out of the era the film is supposed to be in. It's supposed to be a film that takes place in 1983, and it doesn't even look or feel like an 80s movie. It doesn't. At all. So, unlike Days of Future Past, which actually did feel like a 70s film, this doesn't feel like an 80s movie. From an aesthetic tone, from an aesthetic point of view, it doesn't. Now, it's disappointing. And it's just flat. It just seems like he just took the film and did it for a paycheck. There's no passion here. Unlike Days of Future Past. The editing, I also thought, really could have used some work, and it might have been because of the screenplay, so it might not be entirely the editor's fault, but it just seems like there's just all these different things going on, and none of them really are that interesting or engaging, and it just bounces back and forth way too many times for my taste. It bounces back and forth from Poland to Germany to the X-Mansion to Egypt to wherever. It's just like, oh my God, what the hell, movie? Can you just stay in one place? Or if you're going to go from these other places back and forth, can you actually stay in one of those places long enough to just finish whatever part of the story you're trying to tell in that area and then go on to another one, instead of doing this back and forth bullshit? We're like, oh, we're going to stay in here to tell part of the story, then we're going to go back to this other place and tell part of that story, then we're going to go back to this other place and tell the rest of that other story, then we're going to go back to a whole nother place and start telling a different part of a story, and then we're just going to keep repeating this fucking janky, jacked up bullshit way of storytelling and editing that's just headache inducing. It really is. The cinematography is also equally unimpressive. There's not a single thing about that cinematography in this that made me go, wow, that's an impressive shot. That looked great. The screenplay, the story is, my opinion, probably the weakest part of this movie. Is the worst part of the film. What happened, Simon? What happened? Did you bow out of the film and let a Simon electronic board game write this film? Is that what happened? You put words and stuff on the Simon Says game and had somebody play it at random, and whatever word that the light landed on, you put that in the script? What the hell is this shit? What is this screenplay? I mean, there's so many problems with this story. For one, we open up with the admittedly entertaining prologue in Egypt with Apocalypse. Then we flash forward 10 years after the events of Days of Future Past. And we have the school is up and running, and Xavier is, going around and teaching new students. And you got a new student, Cyclops, who shows up. And you see a few scenes with him in high school. But then you also have this other subplot with Jennifer Lawrence going around rescuing other mutants in Germany somewhere, or Russia, or whatever it was, I don't fucking care. And then you have this other subplot with Michael Fassbender's Magneto, who has settled down and had a family? What? In like Poland somewhere? I'm like, what the hell is this shit? It just comes out of nowhere. It's just like, bam, Magneto is settled down and has a family now. Where the fuck did this come from? This isn't even a realistic story arc for this character. Am I really supposed to believe that Magneto tried to settle down and have a family? Are you fucking kidding me? And that doesn't help either that the way that this whole subplot ends is such bullshit. The way this subplot ends is so heavy-handed, it hurts. It's literally like a heavy hand, like a stone hand that just slaps you right across the face. It's that heavy-handed. And what do I mean by that? Well, this whole setup is that Magneto has been found out because he dared to help and actually try to help some of these guys at a plant and prevent somebody from dying with his powers. So now people see that he's a mutant and he's the infamous Magneto. And so these cops were called, and I guess apparently they took his daughter hostage. He goes and finds her in the middle of the woods and of course he's got his wife in tow with him as well. And then in order to establish the tragedy, in order to establish Magneto giving up on the last remnant of his humanity, or his last hope for a better life, or to establish this cliched bullshit of, well, I tried your way of living, Charles, and it didn't work. We had this hacking bullshit where one of the soldiers, one of the cops, has a bow and arrow and he's pointing at Magneto, and I swear to God, this is what happens. He just goes, whoops, slips, trips over his dick or something, or does whatever. He slips on a banana peel, shoots the fucking arrow by accident, and it goes through his daughter's heart, straight through her heart, and into her mother's heart. and they die in his arms, and he's like, ah! I was like, oh my god, are you fucking kidding me, movie? Are you really, really? This melodramatic shit? This isn't fucking believable. This is laughable. This is laughable as all hell. Whoops! Oh, I'm sorry, I killed your wife and your daughter with one shot. God damn. There's no nuanced storytelling. What is this? And then the rest of the film is pretty much, okay, we got to accommodate and incorporate Cyclops and Jean Grey into the movie. And then we just got to do this whole thing where Apocalypse is just recruiting people for the Four Horsemen. And then his whole plan is, I'm going to rid the world of nuclear weapons. I'm like, I've already seen that before in Superman 4. Why are you reminding me of Superman 4, The Quest for Peace? X-Men Apocalypse? It's not a good idea. Oh, I'm going to take a page from Superman 4. Yeah. Some guy, alien, rids the world. He's not really an alien, but some superpowered being rids the world of all the nuclear weapons. Yeah, fucking wonderful. Great idea. And Apocalypse's plan is he's going to use the Four Horsemen, and his Four Horsemen are Magneto, Storm, Angel, who in this is just an unlikable asshole in this movie. He's like a punk metalhead guy who's just a dick. And Storm, who idolizes Mystique. She's got the mohawk and everything. And then you also have, who's the other one? Oh, Psylocke, played by Olivia Munn, who looks hot, but that's about it. And so he wants to use Magneto, especially to bring about the apocalypse and start over. And the X-Men have to stop him. And he wants to also transport his consciousness into Professor X's body, because Professor X has one of the few abilities that he doesn't have. And the X-Men stop him, and that's it. That's your film. It did not need to be over 2 hours. That's another problem this film had. Why was it that long? Why? It's completely unnecessary for it to be that long, especially with the story that is that simple. It's not that deep. It's not that complex. They stretch things out way too long with this story, with this script. I also felt it was a horrendous adaptation of the source material. It's only loosely adapted from Age of Apocalypse, but regardless, I mean, come on, why are we having this story now? We could have waited and done it right, instead of doing it early and not doing it justice at all. Seriously, go read Age of Apocalypse, go read these other Apocalypse comics, go watch the X-Men 90s animated series version of this story, and you will see exactly what I mean. It's told so much better in that animated series, and it's told so much better in the comic form than it is here. This is such a half-assed way of telling the story. Because you're not even really telling it. You're making up your own bullshit. You're just pulling shit out of your ass. I don't like it. It stinks. Get out of my face. Then we have performances by Oscar Isaac, which honestly, God, Oscar Isaac was miscast here. I don't know if it was entirely his fault or it's just the lines he was given, but still his performance was bad. It was hammy. It was over the top. It was laughable. Apocalypse needed to shut the fuck up and just let his actions speak louder than his words. Because that would have made the character much stronger and actually intimidating and actually a good villain, instead of this zero-rate villain who wouldn't even be a good Power Rangers villain. Or maybe he would be. He would be right at home on Power Rangers, but not in X-Men. And it sucks because I like Apocalypse. And they've just completely did a total bastardization of this character. If you saw this movie and you knew nothing about Apocalypse, and you saw Apocalypse, and this was your first impression of Apocalypse, you'd be like, man, Apocalypse is a pretty lame villain. That's not the case in the comics or in the animated series. He's a much better villain in those adaptations. This is just shit. It's apocalyptically bad. It's an apocalyptically bad rendition and portrayal of Apocalypse. Jennifer Lawrence is sleepwalking through this film because she's just doing it for a paycheck. It doesn't really do that much either except get choked out. Or almost choked out. Olivia Munn is hot. I'm glad to see Psylocke, but she doesn't leave any impression. She's just there. Ben Hardy, like I said, he sucked. He was unlikable. He kind of came across to me as a spoiled 80s hipster douchebag who gives metalheads a bad name. The pacing of the film is also miserable. And the reason why is because the script, it's janky, it's fragmented. We're gonna go from one place to the next, but we're not gonna finish the fucking story. So it's like they chopped the film. It's like they shot these scenes, then randomly cut them in half, and then threw them into a blender, and then poured it out and said, "Okay, here you go. Here's the movie." It's just all over the place, and you're just like, why can't you just stay in this one place, finish this storyline, then go to the next, or cut out entire things, or just make the whole thing, the sequences where Apocalypse is recruiting people, I don't know, a lot shorter than it is, because there's no reason why it needs to be as drawn out as it is in this movie. The music is also another thing that I thought really wasn't that great. Other than the opening title sequence credits music, which is always awesome, the rest of the score did nothing for me. It didn't do anything to incorporate 80s style synth music, which would have been nice to hear since it supposedly takes place in the 80s. It was an unmemorable score that at times was way too bombastic and over the top, which is especially evident in the opening sequence and later in the film. And then we have the effects, which some instances are fine, like when Magneto uses his powers to rip apart Auschwitz, and a few other bigger moments like that. But in other times, they're terrible. For instance, any of the CGI effects that are employed when Apocalypse traps somebody in a wall, that was laughably bad, laughably shitty. Like, really? That looked like Sci-Fi Channel original movie quality effects. I don't know how anybody could look at that who was working on this film and be like, yeah, those effects are great enough. Those effects are good enough to be shown in theaters worldwide. Yeah, those are effects that are worthy of a $178 million production. So, I mean, yeah, some of the effects were just awful. And like I said, just a story. Not interesting in the slightest. I don't care. I don't give a shit. I don't care about Cyclops. I like Cyclops, but I don't care about Apocalypse's plan, what he's going to do, or how he's going to do it. I don't give a shit because I don't care. I don't like Apocalypse. He's not a villain I love to hate. I just hate him, and I hate his stupid face, and I hate his overacting ass. And the pacing sucks. The whole story going back and forth is annoying. And when the film finally does pick up, it's when the young X-Men decide to team up and save the other X-Men, and then they decide to team up and stop Apocalypse. That's the best parts of the film. But it happens way too late into the movie because you have to sift through all this bullshit to get to that point. I need a drink. It's better. But really, honestly, I do not know what else to say about this film. I do not know what else to say about X-Men Apocalypse, except they fucked it up. Again. And that's what frustrates me the most about this movie. I mean, it's definitely a rant. I'm definitely pissed at this movie, but I don't hate it. It's just, I'm disappointed. It's one of those things where it's like, we know when your parents are like, I'm not angry at you. I'm disappointed. And that's exactly how I feel about X-Men Apocalypse. I'm disappointed. And admittedly, I am angry. Admittedly, I am angry about a few things. Particularly how Apocalypse is portrayed in this film. Like I said, even with Oscar Isaac in the role. Make him a man of few words and make his actions speak louder than his words, and you have a much stronger villain, and a villain that actually works in the film, that is intimidating. And you also cut the running time down and you improve the pacing, because you make it so you don't need so many scenes of Apocalypse talking about shit nobody fucking cares about and dragging out the running time with this bullshit. So yeah, pretty sure the Age of Aquarius would probably be more intimidating than the Age of Apocalypse in this movie. But anyway, really, this film sucked. It did. It sucked. Sucked a fat one. Sucked a blue fat dick. Anyway, I don't know what else to say. I was going to rate it out of 5 stars. 2. It's your typical poor, below average X-Men movie that had potential, but they fucking blew it. But anyway, thank you for watching, and I will see you guys later. See ya.